So yeah, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever is currently a match not made in heaven. It was doing okay for a while. It really was. It really was doing well for a while. And look, all the Indiana Fever had to do was get a little bit more structure. A little bit more structure from 2024. They had a system. They had an offense that was the best offense in the league. You had...
A sudden slam echoed through the locker room door inside the Indiana facility as the silence that followed turned almost unbearable. Stephanie White didn't just walk in. She arrived like a wrecking ball aimed straight at the franchise's biggest star. For weeks, the growing tension between the legendary coach and Caitlin Clark had been building like a ticking time bomb, but nobody expected it to detonate this quickly in ways nobody expected today. The rumors of a blockbuster trade are no longer just whispers in the dark. They have become a reality sending shockwaves across the entire WNBA. Stephanie White has reportedly seen enough, and the destination now being discussed for Clark points to a move that could completely rewrite the history of the league forever.
It is... Like, Caitlin's not blameless here. I think Stephanie White's more to blame. Why is Stephanie White more to blame than Caitlin Clark? Because Stephanie White chose to come into an organization with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark didn't choose to be drafted by the Fever. So, like, if Caitlin Clark, or if Stephanie White is choosing to come with Caitlin Clark, you don't go and 180 your coaching style or 180 the team. And
it was supposed to be a match made in heaven, a championship caliber duo built to dominate the league for a decade, but instead of a rising dynasty. What we are witnessing now is a complete collapse of the Indiana Fever's internal structure unfolding in real time. Stephanie White stepped into an organization that already had the most explosive offense in the league, powered by a generational talent in Caitlin Clark, yet instead of elevating that brilliance, she chose to reshape everything by tearing it down and forcing in her own rigid system from the ground up today. She demands structure, discipline, and predictability, while Caitlin thrives in chaos, instinct, and creative freedom that cannot be contained. This fundamental clash of philosophies has created a growing rift so deep that even the front office can no longer afford to ignore what is happening behind the scenes.
Where people are talking about, oh, is Caitlin Clark a cancer and stuff? It's like, we all know Caitlin Clark has improved as a player by a lot. Caitlin Clark is not a cancer. As people, Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White don't hate each other. But I'm being real. Caitlin Clark, she's never lost in her life when there's been an expectation to win. In her life. Like, yeah, when there's no real expectation. Like, she then goes, like, she went and overperformed Iowa.
Sources close to the team say the frustration inside the locker room has now reached a boiling point during recent practices, with tension spilling over in ways that can no longer be hidden. Stephanie White is reportedly demanding a complete 180-degree shift in how the team operates, essentially asking the greatest playmaker of this generation to completely change her natural style and stop being herself on the court today. It feels like a classic case of a coach trying to force a square peg into a round hole, and that friction is becoming more visible every time they step onto the floor together. White knew exactly who Caitlin Clark was when she accepted the job, yet now she is behaving as if the roster itself is the core issue that needs fixing. And now, the unthinkable is unfolding as the Indiana Fever are reportedly beginning to listen to trade offers for the face of women's basketball.
And it's going to be like, the annoying part is like, it is addition by subtraction with Indiana. If Indiana just get rid of Caitlin Clark and they allow Stephanie White to fully play her puke ball, and the Indiana Fever can get back this us against the world attitude that they had last year. But I think it's going to be hard for them to get that attitude because no one's going to hate the Indiana Fever. They're not going to be the most hated team. Like, Angel Reese fans don't hate Chicago, they just laugh at them. Like, you're just going to find the Chicago side hilarious. And there's one...
The narrative painting Caitlin Clark as some kind of locker room problem is being firmly pushed back by those who actually understand the game and what is happening inside the Indiana Fever organization. She didn't choose to be drafted by Indiana, and she certainly didn't choose a system or a coach whose approach appears aimed at limiting her natural instincts rather than unlocking them on the floor today. While Clark continues to handle everything with professionalism and focus, the addition by subtraction argument is beginning to quietly gain traction within certain corners of the franchise. If Stephanie White is committed to implementing a gritty, defense-first identity, it becomes increasingly difficult to fully align that vision with a high-octane offensive engine like Clark's playing style. In that kind of philosophical clash, one direction eventually has to give, and right now the momentum is reportedly shifting toward the possibility of a massive trade discussion gaining real weight.
Like, Angel Reese fans don't hate Chicago, they just laugh at them. Like, you're just going to find the Chicago side hilarious. And there's one very obvious team that the Indiana Fever are going to can trade Caitlin Clark to. It's the Golden State Valkyries. I'm watching them get cooked by the Aces. Get cooked. Juste Jacite is one of the best young players in the world. They just haven't figured out a way of getting anything into her. Like, they haven't figured out a way to get her to play. And this Indiana Fever, or this Valkyries team has no offense. Like, they do not play offense. Whatever about their defense, they do not play offense. And not only that, they have a really good...
What makes this situation even more striking is the assets on the table, the growing desperation, and a system that appears to need exactly what Caitlin Clark provides at this critical juncture. While Indiana continues trying to slow the tempo and reshape its identity, Golden State Valkyries are reportedly starving for an offensive engine capable of consistently putting points on the board. They have assembled a roster built on elite defenders and relentless competitors who can mask weaknesses and lock down opponents, making it look like a near-perfect landing spot for a high-volume creator. And Stephanie White's reaction to the proposed trade package has been described as a mixture of shock and relief, suggesting a turning point that could significantly reshape the Fever's direction going forward.
That would help the Fever. So, the Golden State Valkyries proposed trade. Give up their 2027 first round pick, their 2028 first round pick, and their 2029 first round pick. They give up the 2028 second round pick they got in the Flaugier trade, and they give up their third round pick in 2027. Like, so you get 3 firsts, a second, and you get 3 firsts, a second, and a third. So 5 draft picks. And
what is being discussed as a potential trade package is nothing short of a king's ransom, the kind of deal the WNBA has never seen unfold before, right now gaining traction rapidly. We are talking about 3 future first-round picks spanning from 2027 to 2029, along with multiple second- and third-round assets that would reshape Indiana's long-term flexibility. But it is not just about draft capital, because the immediate impact players heading back to the Fever are equally significant. The name sitting at the center of the deal is Zandolini, a versatile 6 feet 2 inches shooter who aligns perfectly with Stephanie White's defensive-first vision and structured system. She brings toughness, physicality, and an against-the-world mentality that the coaching staff is reportedly eager to reintroduce into the locker room culture. And alongside her, Tip Hayes is also being brought into the conversation as a potential rotational piece to further balance the roster in this bold new direction.
Your Tip Hayes can come in, Kyla Charles can come in, but Amir might be gone. Let's say if Zandolini's gone, Amir's gone. If you end up trading the two young players, you get rid of, you put in Caitlin for Chechi, and you kind of hope for the best. But the Golden State Valkyries need an offensive engine. Because, in fairness, like, they shot 5 of 33s today. Like, Janelle Salon and Chechi shoot the most contested threes in the league. You're going to get open threes for Chechi, Janelle. You're going to get open threes for all these players, and they let them fly. And Amir here just hit 2 3-pointers? What?
Stephanie White's intense commitment to a predictable, structured offense may sound extreme to fans, but in her philosophy, Being completely unstoppable in a system outweighs the value of raw creativity and improvisation on the court today. She wants a roster where every player understands their exact role with precision, discipline, and no one ever stepping outside the defined lines of execution. In her vision, replacing Caitlin Clark with a different type of guard like Zandolini or Chachi is seen as a way for the Fever to return to the identity they had before the hype train fully took over the franchise spotlight. The goal is to become a team that grinds opponents down possession by possession, winning ugly but consistently through structure rather than flair or chaos. To achieve that long-term identity shift, the organization is reportedly willing to move on from the most popular player in the world in order to fully restore their defensive-first culture and get everything back on track with a system-first approach.
This team hides all of Caitlin Clark's weaknesses and plays to her strengths. And yeah, there's a little bit of small ball in there. This team doesn't switch. This team is well coached, and this is a team that needs an offensive engine like Caitlin Clark, because defensively they can compete with anybody on any given night. They just can't score. And then the Indiana Fever realistically need to just become the 2025 Fever again, because you can't beat the 2025 Fever with Caitlin Clark. That's what they're trying to do. Chechi's a obvious option, and you imagine being able to just go back to what you were last year. Addition by subtraction.
They recently shot a staggering 5-4, 30 from beyond the arc, a statistic that highlights their desperate need for a true floor general today. Caitlin Clark wouldn't just improve their shooting, she would create wide-open looks for players like Janelle Salon and Chachi. The Valkyries have a roster full of players ready to let it fly. They just need someone who can consistently draw double teams and find them. Imagine a lineup where Caitlin Clark is surrounded by elite defenders like Gabby Williams and Veronica Burton, a scenario that has the Valkyries' front office salivating and Stephanie White losing her mind over the potential shift in power. In Golden State, Clark wouldn't have to worry about being a defensive stopper because she would have dogs behind her cleaning up mistakes. The Valkyries switch everything, play fast, and are well coached in a way that maximizes a superstar's strengths rather than suppressing them. It is being framed as a match made in basketball heaven. For the Indiana Fever, this trade represents a total reset to the version of the team they actually want to become. They want to return to that defensive intensity where they were the most hated team in the league for physicality, not highlight reels. By bringing in a veteran like Xander Losiny, they get a significant wing upgrade who can stretch the floor without dominating the ball for 20 seconds of the shot clock. It also allows Kelsey Mitchell to take over the primary scoring role, a move Stephanie White reportedly believes will lead to more consistent winning. The salary cap implications are massive, as the Valkyries are in a position where they do not care about draft picks and want to win immediately while building a fan base in the Bay Area. They are willing to absorb contracts or move young assets like Amy Here or Kylie Shook just to make the numbers work. As long as the deal fits within salary rules, the league office is expected to approve it. This is being framed not just as a fantasy trade, but as a calculated move by a new franchise that knows Caitlin Clark is the only way to sell out arenas every single night. When Stephanie White was asked about the ongoing rumors, her response was carefully worded, but still revealing. She didn't give a direct denial. Instead, she emphasized roster cohesion and playing the game the right way, which many interpret as coach speak for not fully trusting the current fit. The tension inside the locker room has reportedly begun to spill over, affecting other players who feel trapped in the middle of an escalating power struggle. Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell find themselves caught between a coach they respect and a teammate who has become one of the most famous athletes in the country. As a result, the chemistry is being described as poisoned, with a potential trade emerging as the only real solution. One of the most shocking parts of this situation is how quickly the Fever are willing to move on from their lottery prize. In most cases, a team would part ways with the coach before trading away a generational talent, but Indiana appears to be doubling down on Stephanie White's vision. The belief is that the media attention surrounding Clark has become a distraction that prevents the organization from building a true culture. They want to become a team nobody enjoys playing against, rather than one everyone tunes in to watch. It is a gamble that could either turn them into a powerhouse or go down as one of the worst mistakes in sports history. The Valkyries roster is already being shaped with Clark's possible arrival in mind. They have a backup point guard in Caitlin who could develop behind Clark, along with veterans like Tip Hayes who can provide leadership the young star has lacked in Indiana. The coaching staff in Golden State is known for being flexible and creative, the opposite of the rigid structure Stephanie White is reportedly enforcing in Indiana. They are prepared to give Clark the keys to the offense and let her operate freely, trusting their defense to handle the rest. Inside the Fever facility, the atmosphere has been described as cold and tense. The coaching staff is frustrated that Clark hasn't fully embraced the new defensive schemes, while Clark is frustrated by the slower offensive tempo. Stephanie White's system demands constant movement and precise spacing that limits the pick-and-roll freedom Clark thrived on at Iowa. When a player's biggest strength is taken away, resistance is inevitable. White's restructuring is being viewed by some as an indirect push away from Clark's natural style, with a potential move to Golden State seen as the final step in that direction. The draft picks involved in this hypothetical deal are being described as the real long-term prize for Indiana. By acquiring 3 first-round selections from the Valkyries via the Seattle Storm, the Fever would effectively control a large portion of the draft landscape for years. It becomes the ultimate addition by subtraction strategy, losing a superstar but gaining long-term depth and flexibility. For a coach who prioritizes system over individual talent, it represents an ideal foundation to build a roster in her own image. Critics are already calling this potential move damaging to the league's growth, but insiders argue it is about organizational survival. A franchise cannot function long-term with a coach and a star player fundamentally at odds over how the game should be played. Stephanie White brings championship experience and a clearly defined philosophy, and she is not expected to change it for any rookie, regardless of popularity or market impact. The fact that the Valkyries are willing to give up 5 total draft picks and a starter like Xander Lassini shows just how much they value the chance to build around the Clark effect. What is even more interesting is how the Valkyries plan to use Clark. They don't just want her as a traditional point guard, they see her as an offensive engine who can also play off-ball next to a downhill driver like Veronica Burton. This combo guard look would make them extremely difficult to scout. Burton attacks the rim and creates chaos, while Clark stays spaced on the perimeter to punish any help defense immediately. It is a sophisticated offensive approach that preserves Clark's gravity without placing the entire burden of creation on her shoulders, and it is being framed as exactly what she needs to take the next step in her career. The reaction from the Indiana fanbase has been a mix of fury and confusion. They waited years for a player like Caitlin Clark, and now they are watching their head coach seemingly push her out the door before the first season is even fully settled. But Stephanie White is focused on the long game, believing that winning games is the only thing that will protect her job in the long run. If she can succeed without Clark by using the assets from the Valkyries, she will be hailed as a genius. If she fails, she will be remembered as the coach who moved on from the greatest prospect in the history of the sport. There is also the against the world factor to consider. Last year, the Fever played with a chip on their shoulder that seems to have faded under the weight of the Caitlin Clark media spotlight. Stephanie White wants that edge back, building a roster of players who feel overlooked and underestimated, players willing to dive for loose balls and play physical defense for 40 minutes straight. By trading Clark, she believes she removes the spotlight and allows the team to return to a more uncomfortable but focused identity. It is a psychological reset she feels is necessary for true long-term growth. As the trade deadline approaches, communication between the Fever and the Valkyries is reportedly increasing. The league office is already preparing for the fallout of what could become the biggest trade in women's basketball history. Stephanie White is standing firm on her demands, refusing to settle for anything less than a massive haul of picks and versatile defensive pieces. She is not just trying to move on, she is trying to win the trade so decisively that her authority is unquestionable. The power struggle in Indiana is reaching its final stage, with Golden State waiting on the other side. The move would also reunite Clark with a system that mirrors what she had at Iowa, fast, explosive, and centered around her vision. In Golden State, she wouldn't be asked to structure her game, but to break defenses apart freely. The Valkyries are prepared to unleash her, with a defensive foundation strong enough to absorb mistakes. While Stephanie White is reportedly frustrated by the possibility of losing her star, she is also recognizing that this may be the only way to fully implement her system. The separation now feels inevitable, with a destination becoming increasingly clear. Ultimately, this saga highlights that talent alone is not enough to build a champion. There must be alignment between coaching philosophy and on-court identity. If Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark cannot find that common ground, then a split becomes the only logical outcome for both sides. The Golden State Valkyries are presenting a pathway that could unlock Clark's full potential, while Indiana attempts to redefine itself around structure and discipline. Whether the trade happens or not, the message is already clear. The Indiana Fever's current identity is under major transformation, and the basketball world is watching closely as the situation unfolds.